Good afternoon. At this time, we'd like to call to order the Palo Alto Rail Committee meeting for Tuesday, March 18th, 2025. With clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Lowing, Councilmember Lithcott Hames.
Here.
Chair Burt.
Here.
For the record, 2 are present, 1 absent. We have quorum.
All right, thank you. At this point in time, we have an opportunity for the public to speak on items that are not otherwise on the agenda, but are in the purview of this committee. And do we have any speakers?
Yes, Chair Burt. We have at the moment 3 speakers and 1 person via Zoom.
Okay, each speaker can have 3 minutes to speak.
Our first speaker is going to be Eric N.
Good afternoon. I sent in some slides. Can you present? So I just wanted to say this is a concept done by somebody who is not a civil engineer, so it may not make sense in the details, but I figured I'd just present it just in case it did. Next slide. So the background is that in May of 2024, the bridge at Churchill became dramatically longer and wider. This was done because Caltrans' request to have a path for maintenance vehicles. A maintenance vehicles place where that would be where the turnouts would be, and so that made the bridge dramatically longer. And so that meant that if you wanted to do jackboxing, that you needed to build the bridge in a place that would interfere with the building that currently exists on the site at the corner there. And so you would have to then acquire that a property, which is something that I know that Palo Alto wants to do infrequently. So the idea is, maybe I'll go to the next. So in the concept, the idea is instead of making sort of one long wide bridge, make one short, narrow bridge that accommodates the rail, and then the other bridge for the maintenance vehicle. So a diesel locomotive weighs around 400,000 pounds. So it's a massive thing, and that would require a massive bridge. And being longer, it would also require even more materials. And so the idea is that by making a smaller bridge, it would make jackboxing easier, and you wouldn't have to acquire the property. After jackboxing, so hopefully the jackbox approach would allow you to avoid the shoe fly track. If not, you could use the place where the maintenance bridge would go, build do the shoe fly track there, and then remove it and place the secondary bridge is for the maintenance vehicles. Maintenance vehicles weigh a lot less than 400,000 pounds, so this secondary bridge would not need to be nearly as massive. So that's the concept. I hope it makes sense, but I'm not a civil engineer, so I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you. And Eric, did you send these to the committee?
Yeah, I sent it to clerk. Should I send it to the committee too?
The clerk can forward it to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excuse me, for the city clerk and for the chair, one question of clarification. I believe clerk mentioned that one of the testimony expected is by Zoom, and I believe we're only taking in-person testimony for general public comments.
Oh, we did make that decision for council meetings. I don't think that
It is stated in your printed agenda that members of the public may speak in person only on an item not on the agenda. So just note that for the record. leave it to Chair and
So I do see it on the agenda. I don't recall that having been the council action. And as having been the person who made that motion, my recollection is that it wasn't.
It says both in person and via Zoom.
Oh, yeah, we have, on the front page, we're talking about public comments. Oh, it says both in person and via Zoom on the front page. So the front page and the back page make two different statements.
well, on the front page, I believe it refers to agendized items. Public comments for agendized items will be accepted both in
And
person and
agenda.
via Zoom.
Public comments for agendized items, yeah. Okay.
Within their discretion.
All right, well, then we'll go ahead and abide by the agenda here. The remote speaker is welcome to send in comments, and then we'll follow up and confirm what the council action actually was. Okay, and next speaker in public.
Our next speaker is Amber W.
I'm back. Hey, Railway Committee, it's Amber. I spoke at the city council meeting and told some others that I would be coming today. So here I am. I'm trying to revive community coalitions, engage with the city, schools, and parent networks, and I'm super excited to partner with all of you on rail crossing improvements. Specifically, structural deterrents and barriers to facilitate intended pedestrian behavior. There's a lot of hard, complicated work, I know. I want to foster a strong collaborative alliance on how we can best support railway safety within budget, with our community and commuter input, and with our most vulnerable and most valuable children's safety in mind. There was an article today in the SF Chronicle entitled, "Kids are dying on the Palo Alto train tracks. The city might have 35% of new designs by 2027. It called out the Palo Alto process. I quote it here, where deliberation becomes an end in itself rather than a means to action. With funding received but the delays on action, the great separation will become even more costly due to inflation and tariffs on steel and building materials. I'd like to challenge us to change the Palo Alto process narrative to efficiency, innovation, and action. That is the Palo Alto that I know. As we continue to move forward on grade separation discussions, I would also like us to explore options for additional immediate remedial railway improvements in parallel. That's a mouthful. To encourage intended pedestrian behavior. Rail Sentry is not enough. Platform screen doors have been implemented around the world, but probably don't make sense for our current railway geography. Intermediate fencing is an FRA approved and potentially one option that could be installed. I urge you to work with the appropriate governing bodies and experts on how we can do more in the near term to reduce means access. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carrie. Why?
Good afternoon, Rail Committee. I'm here because I came to your committee 1.5 years ago to advocate using it was up to $30 million. There was California State Transportation Agency $23.8 million grant for the final phase of Churchill grade separation. And there was $6 million from the Federal Railroad Administration for grade separation. So that was $30 million. And I remember I spoke to y'all and I said, you could almost finish the Churchill closure plus mitigations option because that was the cost from the XCAP committee of between 50 to 60 million. So basically that money could have all been allotted. That Churchill crossing could have been done, finished. Okay. So I read about the suicide on the tracks and I was in disbelief because I spent 1.5 years working on the XCAP committee or just coming to the meetings. I was not a member of it. And I hope you all look back at it because it was a 6 in favor of the position for the Churchill closure plus mitigations versus 3 for another proposal or what was going to happen. So I'm really in disbelief. And I have to tell you personally, my story, I have twins who are 20. 5 years ago, I had to make a decision where they're going to go to Pally, a private school, or Gunn, okay, from where we live. And I really thought about it, not too hard. And I said, forget Pally, because I know the house I own, which is rented, is a half a block from the tracks. So they would have had to cross those tracks every single day. And my kids have emotional problems. My daughter has pretty moderate to severe depression, ADHD, anxiety. My son has some other comorbidities. So I made that decision, but I don't think you're letting the Pally parents who are coming in here as ninth graders know what that entails. And I hope you all go out some morning and just watch those bikes go across that crossing, or come in the evening and watch them coming back from school. To me, it's a death trap. I would not let my kids go near there. I do not understand. I don't think there's a valid reason for no cost analysis comparing the partial underpass versus the Churchill plus closure mitigations. I never saw a cost analysis. Maybe there is one. I don't know if there was one ever done. I know you spent thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't think there's any valid reason for not having grade separation completed at Churchill. I just don't get it at all. And I thank you, Amber, because I don't know her at all, but I think I follow in her strong words. And I don't know what happened here, but 2021, 4 years ago, March of 2021, the XCAP committee findings were done. There's a 100-page report. And I don't know, I agree with the Chronicle, I guess, or San Francisco paper. Thank you.
Our final speaker is John M.
Hello, I'm John Melnichuk. Sorry about the miscommunication. I'm a step behind it seems around the idea of quiet zones, so we can skip any presentation that I had submitted. What I wanted to, again, thank all of you for taking action on quiet zones. I also wanted to confirm that when we canvassed our neighbors, they didn't really have any idea that a quiet zone was an option, but they were strongly in favor of doing something about the Caltrain horn noise and the freight train horn noise immediately in our neighborhood. So you'll be getting positive feedback from the neighbors who look for sound mitigation and reducing noise pollution. And when we also talked about grade separation, it's a thorny issue. All the people we talked to who would be living next to Alma Street or on Alma Street or Park Boulevard, that we talked to, not everybody, but dozens of people, in fact, had the feeling that grade separation wasn't anything that was presented so far, that we could see videos on Palo Alto City website around renderings about if this was one action hybrid, this is how it would look and how the construction would be constructed. Or if there was one hybrid, one viaduct, and so on and so forth, that none of them are actually desirable. And it's a very difficult problem to solve, coming towards $1 billion now, after Broadway in Burlingame costs went up millions and millions of dollars. I think it's a complicated question about teenage suicides on our railway. They're terrible. We've lived through them. We're looking for a solution for them. And it's complicated around loss of sleep, SSRIs in teenage brains. And I don't envy your position having to try and find a solution that's cost effective and suitable, because if we have grade separation, construction along Alma Street, we get shoe fly tracks for 6 to 8 years. I'll move. I mean, I've been here 25 years here in Palo Alto, almost already, 23 years. And I'll pay the $600,000 capital gains to get out of here, because it will be completely more unlivable than it's been difficult with the train noise already. It will be unlivable for a decade of construction and $1 billion in costs for us, when in fact the Trump administration has signaled that it is not interested to give any funding towards high-speed rail, which has driven this whole process about grade separations. A request and excitement for improvements along the Caltrain corridor, but I don't think Caltrain should benefit from us building their infrastructure. I think Caltrain should pay for that. That's my 2 cents today. And thank you again for taking action.
Concludes general public comment.
Thank you. So that moves us up to the next item, which is updates from our three different agencies, Caltrain, VTA, and city staff. And our first is a presentation from or Caltrain updates. We will also be having a significant presentation under the one action item from Caltrain. So Navi, did you have some other updates?
Yes, I did, Chair. So good afternoon, Chair Burke, Councilmember Lythcott-Hames, and members of the public. As many of you know already, my name is Navi Dhaliwal. I am Manager of Government Community Affairs at Caltrain, and it's good to be back and to talk to you not only about the item that's on the agenda, but provide a brief update on some of the rail crossing enhancements that the community can expect to see, as well as an additional pilot program that we are intending to launch very quickly at the Palo Alto station. So just to kick us off, Rail Sentry was installed at Churchill on March 12th and 13th. That system is currently in its learning mode, but it's using AI technology to observe grade crossing behaviors of vehicles and pedestrians. This is fully intended to ensure that there's just less vehicle pedestrian incursions, bike incursions. And so we've seen a massive improvement at the Broadway Burlingame crossing. And so are excited to see this program being implemented at Churchill. This process will help determine appropriate geofencing and develop warning and notification rules that we can not only use at the crossings that we're going to be installing them at, but take lessons learned and apply them corridor wide. Typically, this learning phase takes about 2 to 3 weeks to gather a representative sample of data. And so I'm happy to come back and share that information with you all alongside our Chief Safety Officer, Mike Meter. During this period, we're also going to plan to review video footage, and Caltrain will continue to work with the city of Palo Alto, who've been great partners to enhance safety measures at this crossing based upon the insights that we get from Rail Sentry. So just wanted to provide a brief recap on Rail Sentry because I know it's been talked about sparingly in the articles that have come out recently. In terms of the GO 88 application, we are preparing to submit that for rail crossing enhancement following communication with the California Public Utilities Commission. This will help us shepherd in additional improvements, including paint striping, and we'll be reaching out to the city of Palo Alto for any additional information needed to really finalize that application and get them submitted as soon as possible. Additionally, I just wanted to provide a brief update on the fencing work. As of last week, the contractor has replaced approximately 1,700 feet of fencing out of the total 4,000 feet, just under halfway completed. The schedule previously shared with the city lists April 17th as the completion date, and we may remain on track to get that work done. We'll have more clarity if there's any changes in the first week of April, but we'll be sure to make sure that if there's any shift in the schedule, we're anticipating it'll be minimal, but that we're making sure we're communicating it with the rail committee as well as members of the public. And then finally, moving to Caltrain's new and exciting pilot program. So we just recently installed Throne Smart restrooms at 3 of our stations. 2 were installed last week at Redwood City and Sunnyvale, and now we're proposing one at Palo Alto Station. The restrooms are installed, cleaned, and maintained by Throne Labs, with cleaning conducted multiple times a day by Throne employees. They are ADA accessible, featuring a ramp for entry, and have exterior cameras to help deter vandalism. Access is managed via text messages or QR code, enabling Throne to gather real-time feedback of real-time feedback that supports maintaining cleanliness and security. At Palo Alto Station, the restroom will be installed on the east side, on the sidewalk in the parking lot. And while I don't have any pictures of the material, I'm happy to share that with the committee or at a future council meeting, because I think this is something that we've heard a lot in terms of feedback of having the restrooms available at Palo Alto Station. So we're excited to see how this pilot will actually test. But we've already gotten great feedback from Redwood City and Sunnyvale, and the results are promising. Over 350 uses have been recorded with no reports of vandalism thus far from our users. The pilot is planned to run for 1 year, and we will closely monitor its progress, making adjustments as needed based upon results and feedback. So that was the general update that I wanted to provide on behalf of Caltrain, and I'm welcome to take any comments or feedback on future updates the committee would like to hear from the agency. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dhaliwal. Appreciate it. I just had a couple follow-up questions to help the members of the public and me perhaps understand more thoroughly. You mentioned the rail sentry, and one of the pieces of that the data it yields might lead to something around geofencing. Can you say more about what geofencing offers?
You know, Councilmember Lythcott-Hames, I am not the subject matter expert when it comes to rail sentry, but we're happy to provide come back and provide additional clarification on like what the specifics of that specific feature helps us deliver.
I can offer my understanding, and Ripon, are you able to chime in? Okay. The rail sentry, we already have certain sensors ourselves that we've been operating, and will communicate with both public safety, and now do ours communicate directly with the trains?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. And the rail sentry adds additional cameras and LiDAR sensing. And what the geofencing is referring to is what are the specific physical boundaries at which if somebody crosses, it sets off the alarm, notifies even the conductor on the train, potentially for an emergency stop. And at Burlingame, the primary problem there has been vehicles. We actually at Churchill have had a high vehicles on the tracks, vehicles even being hit over time. In parallel to this rail sentry, Caltrain has been working with Google, Waze, and Apple on their maps, which have, based on the lack of granularity of the GPS, has misleadingly directed people to turn down the tracks, and we have people who turn down the tracks. A lot of this happens at night when they can't see it so well. So another feature that's getting installed shortly, if I recall correctly, is solar lighting and delineators, so that even at night, it's really blaring on the boundaries. And then as Navi mentioned, there's also additional painting, striping that make it even more clear to cars where to stop, where the boundaries are, and a whole bunch of modest measures that in the aggregate have an impact on both the safety of cars inadvertently going there and individuals who might deliberately enter the track area.
Thank you. I went out on a police ride along early in my time as a council member. It was at nighttime. We went past Churchill and a car had done exactly that, driven right onto the tracks. And so I've seen the reality of that firsthand. Thankfully, nothing happened, but sounds like great improvements. Let me get to the fencing work. Again, for the sake of the public, really interested, particularly now in light of what's happened in recent weeks. It'd be wonderful to just hear a little bit more about our confidence in fencing. 1,700 feet out of 4,000 have been installed. Can you just give us a little bit more on east side versus west side? And what is it that we predict? Help us understand how fencing is an important component of this overall intention to reduce loss of life at the tracks.
That's a great question. What we know is the fence replacement work will begin. It begins at the southern end of the southbound Palo Alto Station platform and then extending south to Churchill Avenue. And really the purpose, I think what we've seen with fencing, number one, it's one of those things that offers not only just a physical barrier, but like a visual that helps folks really, from a mental health perspective is one of the few opportunity or the several opportunities that you have to mitigate folks wanting to approach the track. And so I think obviously there are a number of considerations that you can take to help ensure that you're creating a safer corridor, and fencing has always just been the number one opportunity there that railroads have installed. And I think part of what we're hoping to do is, we received that earmark a few years ago, and that is a product of how we were able to launch this phase one of this fencing work. What we're hoping is, and what our Chief Safety Officer, Mike Meter, has been wanting to usher at Caltrain is, how can we envision a future where there's fencing that is along the entirety of the corridor, so that we can continue to collaborate with our corridor community and our partners in ensuring that at least there's that initial barrier alongside the work that we're doing at the actual at-grade crossings to improve safety as well. And I believe, Chair Burt had touched upon some of them, which is the solar marker delineators, the putting additional paint striping and having rail sentry, because it really is a package of options. So when we talk about fencing, we have to make sure that we're not talking about it in isolation of a number of different improvements that can really enhance safety along the corridor. Hopefully that helped answer your question.
Thank you. And on the smart restroom, I just chuckled when you said drone employee.
Drone.
Oh, throne employee.
Drone employee.
I thought you said drone. I was picking.
Yeah, drone.
Just someone just right above.
So these are actual humans.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I was picturing little robots.
Yeah.
Next generation.
All right. Good. It's exciting that we're part of that pilot. And all right, that's it for me on questions.
Yeah, Nadia?
So can you clarify, does that mean, I thought that there was already fencing between University Avenue Station and Churchill on the east side, and that the improvements were from the Churchill intersection further south to the Cal Ave station along the east side? Is that phase two maybe that's coming?
So what we did in this scope of work, and I might have to phone a friend to the left here, but there were already existing fencing that was in place. And so what we wanted to do is we actually added additional just fencing that was a lot higher. And so we removed sections of the existing fencing and then installed new fencing that incorporated, I don't have.
It's called the winglet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. The word was escaping me, but it's the additional winglets that really do help provide the additional kind of safety measure. And so that folks can't actually climb. And so that was the initial scope of work. And then I think to your point, Nadia, we're really looking at, this is just one part of the effort that we can do to improve safety. And we are endeavoring to see, what are the funding opportunities out there to continue to expand additional fencing along the corridor, not only in Palo Alto, but everything that JPV owns today.
And just to add a little bit more information. So I think it was around 2013, 14, we were able to install fencing on the east side, the length of the corridor in Palo Alto. And this next phase on the west side addresses an area that has some sections of low fencing, including adjacent to Pali High and otherwise. And so that's a valuable next step. I also wanted to mention that on the inadvertent following of maps, Waze and Google have already altered their maps, and Apple was slower to engage with Caltrain, but they are now doing so as well, and we hope that's on the near-term horizon. And then, as Navi mentioned, at Caltrain this last year, we adopted an initiative to pursue corridor-wide safety and security best practices on the entire corridor. And Caltrain had, over the last 15 years, been step-by-step going from very little engagement and sense of responsibility for protection of the corridor to a very significant one, but had not said, okay, we keep making progress, but what's the end point that we're aiming for? And so this was a big policy decision, which then has had to go through, okay, what would that entail? What would it cost? What are the potential funding sources and how do we pursue it and then enact it? And so Caltrain has been pursuing certain grants, initial grants, didn't receive the first one. I will note that at MTC this last week, we had a policy discussion on legislative initiatives, and this ended up being one of the initiatives we discussed for cap and trade dollars at the state level, in part because high-speed rail receives 25% of the cap and trade dollars, and high-speed rail still has in their plans to come up the peninsula. But in those plans, there are no plans to grade separate and no funding in the high-speed rail business plan that's up to $130 billion. It doesn't include any grade separations. It's quad gates on the peninsula with trains going 120 miles an hour. Setting aside for the moment our concerns over whether that's adequate, the argument we have made is then, okay, if quad gates are in your plan, then step forward and provide that relatively modest amount of funding for quad gates and other safety measures on the corridor. And this is something we'll be advocating to the legislature, and we'll be looking for elected representatives throughout the corridor to advocate with our legislators in this really important opportunity when cap and trade dollars are renewed and we can hopefully redirect some of those dollars to more valuable measures. So that's my additional info. Okay, that's it, Navi?
Yes, that is all.
All right, thank you. And next is VTA updates. Do we have any updates from VTA?
We don't have anyone from VTA today, but city staff can update on the city projects.
Great, okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Actually, council members, Ripan Bhatia, Senior Engineer with Office of Transportation. So city staff is working on several projects along the corridor in Palo Alto. That includes quiet zone, pedestrian underpasses, and safety improvements in crossings at these crossings also. The first one I'll touch upon is the quiet zone projects. For Palo Alto crossing, the city has received CPUC approval to proceed with construction. We have completed the design, and now the project is transitioned to the construction phase. We are working with Public Works staff to procure the construction contractor to complete these improvements. And we have already also issued the notice to intent to FRA to implement a quiet zone at this location. Following the construction, we would also have to issue a notice of implementation to the FRA and CPUC once the construction is complete, which staff will pursue as the time comes. And also for Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston crossing, we have met with FRA, CPUC, and Caltrain in late 2024. We have developed the conceptual plans, which were shared with the rail committee late last year as well. And we are planning to conduct now an outreach meeting to our community and tentatively scheduled for April 16th. So we are going through the motions, and we will be notifying residents in that communities about this upcoming meeting. If council and committee members would like to attend, we can coordinate with our city clerks and have them participate at these meetings as well. For South Palo Alto bicycle and pedestrian underpasses, it's a planning phase right now, and the project aims to develop 2 grade separated pedestrian and bicycle underpasses in south of Oregon Expressway. We have hired the Skittles and Associates in late 2024, and they are working on the existing conditions to review those existing conditions and come up with looking at alternatives. And community outreach is being planned to seek feedback and comments, and it's currently scheduled on April 2nd, 2025 at Mitchell Park Community Center, and another opportunities for our community as well as council members to engage and provide feedback. And of course, coordinate, the council members are encouraged to coordinate with city clerk office if they would like to attend. In addition to to these projects, we also have safety improvement projects that are on currently planned and in construction phase. One is the Churchill Avenue and Alma Street. We call it Section 130 funded projects, and they are. It includes pre-signal, bicycle, and pedestrian, ramps improvements, widening of the pedestrian crosswalks, and other traffic signal improvements and enhancements, integration with Caltrain preemption of the traffic signal. So safety improvements that cater towards both signalized improvements as well as preventing anyone on the railroad tracks intrusions on those, and also providing more time for pedestrians to cross and ensure that they meet with the current regulations and standards. So those are ongoing right now and are expected to conclude in late spring, early summer of 2025. There were some night work scheduled last week, so from time to time the work has been scheduled in the nighttime because of the restrictions, and that's what causes the sometimes longer time to construct these improvements. Similar to Churchill and Alma Street safety improvements, we have received funding from federal for the Charleston and Alma Street intersection improvements also. So we are looking at similar improvements for traffic signal and intersection for improving bicycle and pedestrian mode of traffic, as well as for vehicular traffic to ensure there's safety at this intersection in operations. And there would be a pre-signal to improve and have a new signalized equipment there. A diagnostic meeting will be conducted with California Public Utilities Commission and FRA, and we are scheduling that meeting and hopefully in early summer, late spring. And then we have already executed agreements with state for disbursement of funding, and staff will be conducting surveys and collecting data at those locations to ensure that our improvements are in line with the future conditions and the current conditions. And that concludes the city staff updates, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Julie?
Thank you, Mr. Bhatia. Appreciate you. On quiet zones, great to hear that the Palo Alto crossing is ready for the construction phase to begin shortly. And on Churchill Meadow in Charleston, sounds like there's a community outreach meeting you mentioned for April 16th. Could you say where that meeting is, if we know, and what time? I know there are people here who've spoken in public comment who are interested, and I know many others in the community are probably eager to be a part of that.
Certainly, we are planning to have the meeting at the City Hall, either at the council chambers or the community room. So those are.
And do you have a time of day yet?
6 p.m.
6 p.m. I missed that. Sorry. Okay. Being a member of the Rail Committee now for a couple of years, I'm aware that the folks at Charleston and East Meadow and in the vicinity are really doubly impacted by the fact that those crossings are a quarter mile apart. And when I went over there and listened to the noise, I didn't appreciate until I visited that you basically get, I think each conductor has to blast twice for each crossing. So it's 4 blasts that they hear if their house is in that vicinity of both, and they hear it for every train going up and going down. And this is a community that's also worried about impacts to property of potential grade separation solutions. And so we have an opportunity at this meeting, I think, to strengthen our connection to this portion of this set of residents in Palo Alto, to continue to build trust and confidence in processes And I know this is something that matters to you greatly. I really see an opportunity here on April 16th. There's been, we've had letters and we've had people comment about, why aren't you doing quiet zones? We are, but I think this is where the time it takes to put a robust set of changes in place in a city makes people impatient and maybe lose trust in the fact that it's happening. So I just encourage all of us to be as clear as we can be about what's happening and what's next, and to try to help our residents be just that much more informed about what is happening and what isn't happening. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Ripping on the first on the quiet zones, I think you had provided was there in the fall, we had a timeline when we had the consultants present on the quiet zones, a projected timeline and the milestones that have to go through. And I just wanted to make sure that, because we have people who have an even greater focus on that we're explaining what are the steps and why it takes so long. We as a committee were frustrated, and I think our staff was frustrated that it does take that long, but a number of the steps have to do not with us, but with the California Public Utilities Commission. And does the FRA have a role in that as well? So can you just refresh us on the timeline, and then also a brief refresher, because of that meeting we really discussed in a first moderate detail the prospect of wayside horns, which are, rather than locating horns on the train and blasting before the train gets there and through the intersection, it's just blasting from a fixed location at the intersection. And the heat maps of the amplitude of the noise showed that typically those are like an 80% reduction in noise for surrounding areas. And I think that was even without sound attenuation measures, which might go further. And one of the things that was particularly interesting about the wayside horns is because the timeline for implementation was much shorter than through this other process that we have to go through for quiet zones, less expensive. And then I do want to note that from Caltrain standpoint and other rail practices, there is a hesitancy to adopt quiet zones because of perceived safety value to the blasting of the horns, and that they don't feel that quiet zones are as safe as the current method. And that's a trade-off. And we get here people who come forward and say the most important thing is safety. No, the most important thing is quiet zones. No, the most important thing is closure. No, the most important thing is the mobility or other factors. And the reality is we have a number of different factors we're trying to balance and solve problems to. One factor is an issue, impact, is most important to one segment of the community, and that's can be a sizable segment. Oh, and I should say, and others who say far and away the most important impact is property impacts. And we're trying to reconcile all of those. So I just want to put that in the context of the quiet zones, that this is something we are moving forward on, but it is not without tensions with other issues. But can you refresh us on the steps and the timing for the full quiet zones and for the wayside horns?
So the steps are the similar for both processes, for quiet zone or the quiet zone implementation as a wayside horns or as part of the other full quiet zones, because it requires the CPUC and Caltrain concurrence and reports to the FRA, and then FRA's buyout on the proposed plan and the in our initial concept plans design offers. Sometimes the challenge in the timeline is the coordination and seeking that concurrence from those agencies, because they are at federal level and state level agencies that have priorities, much higher priorities and other projects that they're working on, and sometimes getting their attention to get to meet with them, and requirement of the FRA is some of those timelines can be outside of our hands, and therefore we are dependent on them for their approval. Just like I was sharing with that for the Alma Charleston, we want to have a diagnostic meeting, and scheduling a meeting takes a lot of effort and timing wise also, because to get those parties and it has to be in field and in-person meeting with all those representatives from different organizations. So the steps involves an original concept plan development based on the meetings and concurrence from both those departments. Then feedback from the community and also acceptance and buy-in from the various, of course, bodies, which is our rail committee as well as the city council. And then going back and getting those plans designed and getting the approval, which is called GO 88B approval for a permit to construct. And that permit has timelines also, so we can't get too much far in advance. We cannot get too much later in the process, because the timings for the constructions are limited to the issuance of the permit. And then before construction, we also have to issue notice of intent. And then it also has its own regulatory time period for the comment period from FRA and CPUC. And after the construction is complete, then you have to do notice of implementation, which also has its own statutory guidelines for the number of days it has to be on the street for public hearing. Finally, we can request Caltrain to then once all FRA gives us a final approval, then we would be able to give Caltrain to implement the quiet zone.
And so all that time together, as I recall, was 3 to 4 years?
So we anticipate about 2 to 2.5 years for the design, this concept plan refinement project time, and then another year to 1.5 years for design, and then another year to 1.5 years in construction. So it totally overall, I would say about 5 years.
And the Wayside Horn timeframe was approximately what?
So the Wayside on the time savings comes in the construction, because the construction is solely on the Caltrain, and then it comes down to that reduction in time, and the cost also, because of the financing and funding that are required to implement those measures are also expensive at times. And if we are looking at, say, quad gates, do we want to use our own funding, or are we going to look at this external funding that you mentioned earlier on, that we are advocating already to the federal and state as part of the high-speed rail, that they have the mitigation measures and part of their environmental impact report? So looking at the funding sources, funding scheduling, all that can impact the timeline of the actual construction of these improvements.
And I'll just note one other potential funding source is the county VTA Measure B funds. As of right now, we cannot use those funds for these purposes. They're for grade separations. But that's something that we'll be exploring at VTA and Caltrain, is whether, given that really the changes that we're seeing based upon the incredible cost increases of grade separations, are we really going to allow cities to utilize those funds for measures that would have significant improvements but are not actual grade separations? And that's not yet permitted, but that's something that we'll be exploring.
Let's get a clarification, Pat. Appreciate the degree of specificity you were honing in on quiet zone timing versus wayside horns. I didn't quite get approximately 5 years is the process we're looking at from where we are to quiet zones being completely implemented. What are we estimating it would be that timeline for Wayside Horns? Did you say about half the time?
No, I would say only the savings will be in the construction time. The process is the same as that of the quiet zone.
Okay, so effectively, the construction time is shortened from,
2 years to 1
2
year, maybe
years to
6
1 year.
months, depending on.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that, I think, includes, sorry, yeah.
Sitting here listening to you, I'm first of all impressed by the patience you must have to have in your role to deal with literally bureaucracy. And it sounds so frustrating to know that we have solutions, shorter, what we call near-term, shorter-term, medium-term solutions, as opposed to grade separation, which is, much longer projects and far more expensive. We yearn for these things to happen more quickly. So I'm just curious, what, if anything, more can we do in this climate to lobby folks to respond to our requests for a meeting, to make those meetings happen more quickly? Is there, of all the priorities we have, obviously, everything falls into some kind of order. Give us a sense of whether there's anything more that can be done to pressure or create deeper partnerships with those needed to make these meetings happen more swiftly.
Certainly, we can look at those opportunities and share through our city manager and seek that guidance or advocacy.
He looks pretty skeptical.
I'll just add, I share that concern, and as a result, one of the things I've started talking with Caltrain about is, and some of the elected officials, is what potential do we have to not only engage staff with the California Public Utilities Commission, but through either our board representatives on these various bodies or our state representatives to advocate on our behalf with the PUC. And we'll see whether that can bear fruit, but it's an avenue worth pursuing. Okay. All right, so that moves us on to our main event, which is action item number 1, a summary of the draft project management plan for the advancement through preliminary engineering and environmental documentation phases of the grade separation projects at Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston crossings. And see, we have Navi and Jill. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Ripon Bhatia, Senior Engineer with Transportation. And we do, so we do have a grade separation project that covers Churchill, Meadow, and Charleston. And currently we are in the preliminary engineering and environmental phase. And collaborating with Caltrain, and Caltrain is taking the lead role in doing the engineering and programming for this project. Today we have staff from Caltrain. I'd like to introduce Audrey Brooke. Maybe she can come to the front and introduce herself. Yeah.
Hi, this is Audrey Brooke. I'm the Director of Capital Program Delivery for Design and Construction team in Caltrain. I'm excited to be part of this rail committee meeting today, and I look forward to collaborate with dedicated professionals to enhance our rail network in Palo Alto.
Thank you, Audrey. And of course, Jill Gibson from Kimley Horn is a program manager for the project and will be delivering major portion of the project, and city sponsor represented by me. The purpose today is to go over our project management plan that provides an overall strategic plan of how we are going to deliver the project. So we'll go into the details of those and seek your feedback and comments. We will use your feedback and comments in our future updates and ensure that our FRA and the documents that we submit to FRA and VTA are in compliance with those guidelines, as well as incorporate any feedback and comments from the rail committee. So the agenda for today is to go over the project, discuss our project management plan. Oh, next slide, please. Sam, can you please move this? Thanks. Okay, next slide, please. And so we will be looking at the general engineering consultant process. We are collaborating with Caltrain, and Caltrain, as its first step, will be procuring the services of a general engineering contract to conduct the initial level analysis and project development, and then final formal process of RFP for the 35% development. We'll also touch upon our public engagement and outreach plan. So I'll invite Jill and she can continue. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ripon. Good afternoon. Jill Gibson with Kinley Warren. Happy to be here today. So just as a refresher and reminder, next slide, please. Here's our overall project site, updated project map. It includes the Churchill Avenue crossing. You can also see a dot there for Seal Avenue that we'll be evaluating, and then the Meadow Drive crossing and Charleston Road crossing. Next slide, please. So the conceptual alternatives that we are evaluating that are in alignment with the council direction include Meadow Drive, the two alternatives for the underpass and the hybrid, Charleston Road, which includes the underpass and the hybrid, and then Churchill Avenue, which includes a partial underpass, was selected as the locally preferred alternative with a backup option of the street closure. So our overall project goals are to improve safety, improve mobility, minimize environmental impacts, and minimize potential private property impacts. These goals are synthesized based on all of the past community and rail committee and council work, as well as the recent discussions at rail committee. So welcome feedback on these project goals. Wanted to provide you an update on the good agency work, and the cooperative agreement execution was signed in mid-January. And the funding for this, as a reminder, includes $20 million in total budget, 14 million of VTA Measure B dollars, and of course the $6 million of FRA rail crossing elimination funds. And in short, the project deliverables include the 15% concepts, which we'll talk about, to the 35% design and environmental clearance. We'll also include cost estimates and the construction sequencing plans, which we'll talk about. So overall, our project timeline is to complete the 35% design and environmental documentation by the end of 2027, which is reflective of that cooperative agreement. So that is our hard end date that we collectively are driving towards. So at a high level, we'll be working in Q2 of this year to refine the concepts that we have that I just described a moment ago, and then really driving to the first decision point. So we'll be coming to rail committee and working with city council as well, and seek direction on how to advance, which alternatives rather to advance into 15% design. That second decision point will be coming to rail committee and city council with that 15% design complete, as well as a cost estimate and a draft funding plan, and looking for city council direction on which alternatives to advance into preliminary engineering, and ultimately to proceed in environmental documentation as well. To touch on our design development objectives during this phase is really working on the common understanding of the project development basis and the decision points and implications, so that you all are well informed on the trade-offs. We'll be working on cost-effective delivery, and really importantly, we touched on in the last rail committee, driving durable decisions that stick. Improving price certainty through risk definition and the management of those risks, And then fostering, of course, strong collaboration amongst Palo Alto and Caltrain through all phases of the work. We'll be continuing to focus the scope development while also maintaining the appropriate level of flexibility in this still very early conceptual engineering phase. And then finally, we have a federal funding agreement and scope that we are committed to fulfilling. So I want to touch on the project management plan. Next slide. So the purpose of the project management plan is it's really a living document that communicates to all project partners the overall management strategy of the project. It is a requirement of the federal funding. And so as Ripon mentioned, that up top, we have been working collaboratively with FRA. We've submitted a draft. We received early comments from FRA, and we are working to incorporate those revisions back to FRA in short order. The general kind of table of contents and components include things like the project team organization, clear roles and responsibilities, project control procedures, review processes and timelines, risk management, quality program, which include quality control, quality assurance procedures, and overall plan control and revisions. Next slide, please. So I'm going to kind of highlight some of the things that are in the PMP. So including the integrated leadership team. So we know that it's really important that Caltrain and the city are in lockstep in terms of leading the overall project. Caltrain is holding the contracts for this phase of work. That's where you see that Caltrain is showing leading the overall project direction. However, Palo Alto is the project sponsor. So there's a lot of close collaboration with Caltrain, of course, in the overall direction, project development, review of activities, deliverables, and engagement with you all, as well as your community and members of the public. We're supporting in the project management, providing oversight of the technical activities, the deliverables, and the engagement activities. Next slide, please. So during the concept refinement phase, we are actually in an active procurement. We are working on bringing on a general engineering consultant. So that will be the consultant that actually develops the 15% plans. So that is an active procurement that's underway. Next slide, please. As I think I touched on last time, Caltrain is taking the approach to have an independent cost estimator that is outside of the design team. So these are folks that are have experience in the construction industry, contractor style pricing. So they will be delivering early estimates in that 15% phase to inform you all and others on providing direction on how the project proceeds. Next slide, please. So then in the preliminary engineering and environmental phase, this is that 35% design phase. We will continue to have that Caltrain cost estimator on board. That's an independent entity providing independent cost estimating, as well as we will be procuring through an RFP, a preliminary engineering consultant. So I wanted to touch on the risk management process. So this is a part of the PMP that outlines why we're talking about it today as well. That all project team members are responsible for identifying for the identification of risks, providing the analysis, response, and monitoring of risks. So we'll be working closely with the Caltrain team, the Palo Alto team. We actually have a workshop coming up. We have quarterly workshops to work together and really identify all possible levels of risks. Activities, log those risks, classify each one using the risk probability and impact matrix, and then we'll work through a plan or a strategy of avoidance, transference, mitigation, or acceptance of that risk. And then through these quarterly workshops, working on monitoring them and working through our actions to mitigate those risks. I should say we have quarterly workshops, but this is an ongoing monthly activity that the project development team will be reviewing on a monthly basis. Right, a little bit about the general engineering consultant and selection. So roles and responsibilities. The general engineering consultant will be doing technical tasks such as reviewing data collection, the technical analysis, actually developing the concept refinement, the design development, and providing other technical materials for public purposes such as renderings. Our team will be leading the overall project management and engagement. I have on the line Edgar Torres, who y'all I believe know and are familiar with, but we'll be directing the GEC's technical work, and based of course on the collaboration with the city and Caltrain, and then leading the public dialogue and committee dialogue on the project. Next, there we go. So here's our look at the procurement schedule. As I mentioned, the GEC procurement is live and it's out the bid. So it was released on 3/5 and it will be closed on 3/26. Caltrain will be leading the GEC selection and negotiation as it is under Caltrain's procurement. And the city of Palo Alto will be a close partner and be a part of that GEC selection panel. And then we look forward to kicking off the GEC in mid-May. So touching on the overall GEC process and scope, really it's 4 steps. Concept refinement, so starting with that data collection, developing a basis of design report, building on all of the past work done to date. Our team has worked on really synthesizing the past work to be able to have the GEC have a head start on their work. The GEC will provide the preliminary technical analysis and actually developing those concept design plans, at that point we'll be coming back to the Rail Committee to provide key updates on those conceptual design plans. And then we'll be coming to the Rail Committee, and City Council to identify alternatives to then advance into 15%. And for that 15% design phase, taking the Rail Committee and Council direction to further advance those design plans, conducting that independent cost estimate and schedule, of which we will come back to the Rail Committee and City Council and looking for the action to refine the LPA selection and advance into that preliminary engineering and environmental phase. As a part of this process, we're working on a public outreach and engagement plan. And actually at the next Rail Committee, we're going to be prepared to do a deep dive with you all and share that plan in advance and hopefully a healthy dialogue and discussion on this engagement plan. The purpose is really to articulate the engagement activities, to communicate the key project information, and provide opportunity for broad community participation, and importantly, foster understanding to provide meaningful input at the appropriate phases of work. So the components of this will include things like outreach strategies by milestones, down to the tools and the tactics to have meaningful engagement, identifying the right groups, the corridor partner identification, public engagement, and agency activities. And then importantly, making sure that we are tracking our engagement and evaluating our success in engagement and reporting that to you all. Next slide, please. We're also working on developing the communication strategy quite closely with the City of Palo Alto, including developing digital and printed materials, brochures and flyers, surveys. We'll have a project website and a social media presence. So these things include targeted neighbor outreach, community workshops, open houses, and certainly Rail Committee and City Council updates and participation. So in closing, I think this is my last slide, Ripon, before I hand it back to you. This is the draft milestone schedule. So we've got the body of technical work that I walked through, along with the various kind of placeholders for now: neighborhood, community workshops, open houses, rail committee and city council engagement. And so as we work to refine our outreach and engagement plan and finalize that, we'll put a finer schedule together reflective of that engagement plan.
Thank you, Jill. And next slide, please. So as Jill mentioned during her presentation, at our next meeting, we plan to bring GEC consultant, introduce him to the committee, introduce the consultant to the committee, and also review the engagement plan in greater details. In August, September, we would look at bring the refined plans for the council review and have more feedback and comments from the committee. Finally, before we end the year, we will review the preliminary engineering and environmental documentation request for proposal. So the scope and services that we are going to seek for our next phase of next activity of this project. 2026 will be our key decision point for the 15% review and 35% review and 15% review and moving to the 35% design. So we'll bring back to the rail committee and the council for their recommendation and moving forward with the final design later, 35% design later. Next slide, please. So with that, we are open to questions. Thank you.
Julie?
Thank you, Pat. And thank you, Ms. Gibson and Mr. Bhatia. My question is about how to better align what the process actually entails and takes with public perception of how long it takes, with council expectations for how long it takes. And I want to take us back 9 months to this day, because I believe it was on June 18th, 2024, that this council had a really hard conversation about what to do at Meadow and Charleston, about which alternatives to advance. And the language we used up here was to advance to 15%. We need more information. We need to get to 15% so we can have a much better fleshed out concept of what these options will look like. And there was, it's quite a divided set of perspectives in the community. It's one of the toughest things we have to do as council members. We're elected to do it. But I remember the rhetoric up here about let's just, we're just going to get to 15%. And the preferred alternatives were selected that night on June 18th, 2024. And I think the perception, perhaps in the minds of some, if not most council members, certainly in the minds of the public who read the newspaper article about it shortly after, was that we had come up with two options for those two crossings that were going to be advanced to that 15%. What I'm appreciating today is that, no, the conversation about what to advance to 15% still lies in front of us. And it's in Q3. That's our decision point 1. And I'm trying to reconcile what is it that we misunderstood if we thought back in June of 2024 that we were making the tough decision to advance two options for each to 15% then. What was inaccurate about that understanding, or about what was it that we did on June 18th, such that here we are 9 months later hearing, okay, the 15% is still in front of us.
I can start and then Jill can add on to that. So at June 18th, the council directed us to proceed forward with the two alternatives for Meadow Charleston, and then selected a locally preferred alternative for Churchill. For Meadow Charleston, the council did wanted us to proceed with 15%, but wanted us to come back with a refined version of the two alternatives, limiting or looking at the right-of-way impacts, as well as some improvements on the pedestrian bikeway concerns. So between that 15% development and that today, or at June 18th, we the council asked us to do an additional step to reconfirm those two alternatives. 15% development sometime can be considered concept level and sometimes can be considered as 15% preliminary engineering. So the definitions I will not can be different depending upon individual usage. But the two steps approach is what the council wanted us to do, and that's what we are planning to do as part of this thing. The second thing regarding the timing that councilman mentioned that is taking is that we do have, if we want to use the federal and VTA funding, we have to go through agreements, processing, and signatures and authorizations, and it does take some of those steps take longer time sometimes, and we cannot work on any of those activities if we want to get reimbursements from those processes. So those are some of the timing factors.
That's helpful. Thank you. I'm hearing that.
So let me see if I can get a clarification here. The council direction is unaffected. It stands. Again, what's coming back to you is a refined design on those two alternatives. We're not reopening the universe of alternatives. It's simply a more refined version, this 15% version of those two alternatives. And then potentially at your next decision point, you'll bring that down to one. One, because there's significant costs associated with the further design, such that out of the two, you would select one, and that will then proceed into the next phase.
Into the 15% review phase.
Well, we're referring to it as 35, but go ahead.
That's helpful. So what it sounds like, at council direction, the options are being further refined in response to community concerns about property impacts and other things, which is great. I'm not sure that anyone appreciated back on June 18th that the time it would take from June 18th to looks like Q3 of 2025, that's a year and a half. And so I think it's feeling like it's a longer process than perhaps some of us appreciated at the time. And I'm just noting this because when you sense the frustration, when you look at the Chronicle article today, there's reality and there's perception, and they do sort of blend. There's a fuzzy line between those. At some point, perception becomes reality, and it can be hard to counteract it. So it sounds like what we're going to get is a refined sense of what the two options would look like and lead to and the consequences of them. And simultaneously, we will then, we will have some kind of 15%. Is that what, we've refined them and we're getting them to 15%, right?
Yeah, so it is, if you don't mind going to that timeline.
Slide 10.
Slide 10, thank you. There we go. So starting that, once the GEC is on board, starting the refinement of those concepts from the council direction in the discussion and understanding the goals to minimize property impacts, understanding the mobility and private property impacts trade-offs, refining those concepts, coming back to rail committee, having robust discussion with city council, hopefully narrowing down to one option to advance through 15%, to then come back in Q2 of 26, informed by a draft cost estimate to then receive direction on how to advance into 35% in environmental clearance.
I appreciate the clarity. And I think when I think back on our council conversation, I would have to watch the meeting to be sure. I think there were a number of us who articulated. I remember one colleague in particular saying, we need to put two forward to 15% so that we can appreciate what, their impacts will be. And it sounds like that's not what's happening. We're going to refine the description of them and then choose one that's going to 15%. And that effectively is happening a year and a half after the June 18th, 2024 conversation.
just to add to that, at the decision point 1, the rail committee has an option to proceed forward with both the options. So if you see a clear, see that one only can proceed forward, we'll only proceed forward with one. So that additional information may provide guidance to the staff to proceed forward with the 2 or 1. And we are ready to move forward with 2 if that's the rail committee's attention would be.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And just to follow up on that, Jill had mentioned really both trade-offs, things like property impacts versus the mobility. And that's a big tension. And then also what's gone on in the last several months has been an ongoing engagement between the city and Caltrain on some of the standards and requirements that Caltrain has imposed, which impact the cost and the desirability and feasibility of different alternatives. And we haven't completely resolved all those. And so there's a tension between Caltrain's operational desires versus what I've brought up at the Caltrain board of distinguishing between preferences and necessities and not confusing the two, because where it's Caltrain's preferences operationally that may run up against the feasibility of being able to do a grade separation, we have to reconcile those two things. So that's what, and I hadn't understood kind of all the nuances of this, but the concept that we were going to get those negotiations that would go into refining the concepts, that then we'd go into the 15%, because we don't want to go into the 15% with something that we go, we won't accept that significant of property impacts. And if we just say, but we're going to move forward, then what do? We kill an option that might have solutions to it if we worked through those solutions. I will say that actually through an even greater challenge, which is the BART tunneling, which I've been deeply involved with the last couple of years, there is really now a seminal study and book on how big things get done. It's by the global renowned experts on transportation mega projects and now mega projects in general, and really looking at the factors that go into why I think it's 97% of mega projects do not come in on time, on budget, and for that matter, with the ridership projected. But the on time and on budget, 97% globally. This ain't a Palo Alto process problem. And then that study, and he has the global database that really affirms and provides facts and data to support the conclusions that he has drawn, really then breaks down how to improve the odds of a project going successfully. It's not that by roll the dice, 3% come out. Well, that 3% did some certain practices better than the other 97%. And so us making sure that we really proceed in a way that is going to have the greatest chance of success is really important. One of the big takeaways is don't rush to construction. Burrow really deeply on analysis and simulation and iterations, and do it. And then when you construct, move quickly. And there is a temptation to go, no, I want to shovel in the ground. I want to see that first shovel in the ground. And the transportation industry literally has a term of stake in the ground that for high-speed rail or wherever, and he cites high-speed rail as one of the greatest models of bad management of mega projects globally. California high-speed rail in particular. If they spend the first $5 billion, they will, on a project, they'll never back off and spend the next 145 billion because they don't want to have wasted the first 5, even if it went from 50 billion to 150 billion cost. So how do we avoid those pitfalls? That's a challenge that we're trying to address. And part of that is I wanted to ask a little more follow-up on the independent cost estimating. And my understanding is there's really 2 different approaches that can be taken. One is a bottom-up with an expert that says, here's the cost that I'm experienced with or can look at. And then the other is reference projects, essentially comps. And none of those are perfect. There's also a fallacy that is a uniqueness fallacy. It says, oh no, we won't look at the reference comps because our project's unique. And virtually everybody says theirs is unique, and therefore they don't look at the really value of the reference comps. But aside from the pure cost standpoint, a real value is looking at risks that have occurred in comparable projects. And how can we have that bucket of risks and understand them, understand their likelihood, and move to mitigate against them. And so as much as everybody says, I want to see that shovel in the ground, and doing it right is essential to success. And that's not the comfortable, fast approach. And but we are not alone in terms of either being tempted to go forward, or that you start to go forward on a streamlined path and then realize you have to step back and do it right. It's the refrain of why do we never have enough time to do it right, but we always have enough time to do it over. And that really pertains to a lot of this planning. And we're seeing that right now with Burlingame, where they went from 300 million or so to 600 million last year to 850 million in just a few years. We had this with the BART tunneling, where we were 6.8 billion, and we're now just, that was 3.5 years ago. We're now 12.8 billion and trying to prevent it from going higher. And neither of those were Palo Alto projects nor Palo Alto process. And I will just say that this had this Chronicle article of today, referenced twice. That columnist, not a reporter, who's I think a cultural and food reporter, but suddenly a rail expert, interviewed me, and I provided a bunch of information, and none of that made the cutting floor. There was a conclusion that had been drawn at the outset, and it appears that the information in the column was what would support that conclusion. I also wanted to ask about what best practice tools do we have available for simulations, and through simulations, cost-effective iterations, which are really an important part of looking at what selections. So are we able to access really state-of-the-art tools?
I have my partner, Edgar Torres, colleagues online, and I think he'd love to engage in that.
Welcome, Edgar.
Thank you. Yes, we can actually work with the GEC in developing what's known as digital twins. And so that's able to create the environment known as the build environment, and be able to develop that design, that digital twin, and understand how it can be then potentially constructed. This allows us to be able to do it in 3D and then be able to test the different spaces of how things can get done. Now, that's most effective the further along you get in design. there's less information available during the refinement phase, but more information as you get into 15 and therefore into 35. So this BIM model or this digital twin is developed along the way, and more information is then added to that robust model. And we're able to further develop a rigorous process as we get more information. So that rigor is important on asking those questions of ourselves and expect those questions as to how certain things would take place in that built environment. So that would be whether it's a hybrid or an underpass, and understanding what the process would be for constructing.
Thank you. And, I mentioned the Burlingame project, but we also saw just recently similar outcomes from Ringstorff, which was, I think as of a year ago, they were still using, was it 250 million? And it went to 330 million when they thought they were ready to break ground after multiple years. And each of these projects had been cited as, well, they're way ahead of Palo Alto and they've gone forward, and they're, everything is locked down. And now it's up to, 9 months or so ago, went from 250 to 330, and now it's 450, is it? And that's a fairly conventional underpass. It's not the complexity that Burlingame has of a station and connected with the grade separation and otherwise. So I think that means from everything we've seen from mega transportation construction projects like the tunneling, like what we're seeing on the peninsula, like we're seeing elsewhere, the cost estimates that we had 4 or 5 years ago are out the window. We should not assume that we'll be anywhere near those. We don't yet have updated numbers, but let's just quit kidding ourselves that they're in the ballpark. And we'll have unpleasant surprises ahead of us, but we should be not shocked by them, and anticipate very major cost differences, which will have to go into our decisions on what we have funds available to do. Measure B provided about 370 million. We thought that was growing, but now with sales tax revenues actually declining, it may be limited to something like that. And then we have the question of what state and federal dollars we'll be able to qualify for. One of the main reasons that we're moving this aggressively when we got the federal grant is that the FTA tends to follow when they fund design. That makes them much more likely to subsequently fund construction or a significant share of it. And so we were very fortunate to get that 23 million from them, or this, I have it backwards, 6 million from them. But that 6 million is maybe more important than the state dollars, because it goes hopefully eventually to additional federal funding. Of course, we don't know under the current administration what will change. So anyway, that's a lot of context, but I want to get some of that out on the table. Yeah.
Make sure that's on. I wanted to address a couple of comments because I think you hit on some really key points, right? And I just want to make sure that the committee kind of gets additional context of what we're seeing at Caltrain as a lead implementing agency in these grade separation projects along the corridor. And what I just wanted to say is, we have a really keen understanding of what is happening corridor wide, but also nationwide, and what the market is looking like today. I mean, we know that there's nationwide increases due to inflation, supply chain disruptions, and labor shortages. And what we're seeing is more than 20%. But that's not the only issue, right, that's contributing to these cost increases. And part of what we're understanding now is that building an electrified environment is just more challenging compared to what a diesel system, because there is additional safety protocols and conditions that are bringing on additional complexities when building around these systems. And so part of what I wanted to applaud the city of Palo Alto and this project team specifically for doing is bringing in these early contractor pricing to get more accurate information. And that's already embedded in this project management plan so that we can get a better forecast of what are these costs, right? And how are we making decisions to move and advance these community vision projects forward so that they are really focused on not only viability from a technical component, but also fundability. And so I think there's a number of protections, including the VTA ad hoc for grade separations, where there's corridor-wide conversations, but even more specifically county conversations that are talking about how do we deliver these projects in a viewpoint that just makes sense so that we can adhere to what the market is telling us today. And then finally, I just wanted to touch upon in the coming months, in close collaboration with our corridor partners, we are anticipating a larger conversation about how do we address these projects on a corridor scale through the corridor crossing strategy, and that program of, how do we identify what projects are grade separation projects versus safety enhancements like we touched on earlier this afternoon, or closures. And so these are conversations that we want to have, but I think it's important to understand, I think back to your point, Councilmember Lythcott-Hames, about just advocacy and wanting to speak through one voice, is we want to deliver these projects regardless of what they are in a way in which makes sense, so that we're getting just a clear picture of what the future looks like. But ultimately, part of what we're doing today is just making sure that in these, I'm looking at the milestone schedule on Jill's laptop, but making sure that there's key inflection points that are allowing folks like yourselves and the council to make decisions that are well informed of not only technical work that needs to happen, but also, what is the market telling us today, so that we can deliver whatever the community vision is that makes sense for Palo Alto. Thank you.
All right. And do we have members of the public who want to speak on this item?
Through the chair, we have 3 members of the public that would like to speak. Our first speaker is Michelle G.
Hi. Thank you again for all your work on this. I did want to let the council member know that the Seal Avenue, people who are concerned about it haven't really been approached or engaged. And we're really eager to talk with folks who are doing some of these proposals in order to get our viewpoints. I'm personally concerned, and I'm sure you guys are concerned about minimizing the property impacts, but I do see them as extensive and perhaps underestimated. For example, so I live on the 3rd house in from Alma on Seal, so I'd be directly affected by this. So instead of, I sit out on my front porch, normally I can see the house across the street, the nice trees. In the proposed plan, I'd see the wall of the tunnel going through the center of our street, because we'd lose the trees on both sides, because fire trucks, et cetera, have to be able to turn. We would also, I'm concerned about that all 3 residences on our property, so we have a house and a back duplex, they would all be not able to get in the driveway because of the turn radius. We have fences all around there. So with the new plan, we wouldn't be able to access our 3 parking spaces. Also, our 3 houses only have 3 parking spaces, so we rely on the 2 parking spaces in front. We would also lose those. That's a significant impact, especially with getting any kind of renters, or, think about if you have in your house more than 1 car, where would you park it, even if you could get it in the driveway? We are also concerned about increased traffic, especially late at night when the dark park could have all sorts of activities and direct access to our neighborhood. I am particularly concerned that the Churchill underpass plan doesn't have a good plan for bikes and pedestrians. And without that, you're going to see bikes, the 800 that we heard about, in other meetings, 800 bikes a day going on the Churchill, they're just going to take over the lane. So instead of a nice protected, let's get the bikes safely across the street, you're going to be forcing them to move into the lane with cars. And I think there'll be some unforeseen impacts of that, and that I'm concerned about. Also, by using the Seal Tunnel, you're forcing bikes to cross Churchill to get to Seal. Right now, they could just go across Alma, and so you're forcing them to still do a crossing across a street. Again, thank you so much for your time. We weren't mobilized about a year ago when you guys voted to go from Seal, from Kellogg to Seal. Nobody was in that room for that decision.
That concludes your time.
Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Melinda M.
Hi, thank you, Rail Committee, for all your work and everyone on this topic. I just want to say on wayside horns that we've been warned by that the manufacturers don't want to install them because they can't repair them. And if they break down, then you lose your quiet zone designation. On the level crossings, I have several things to say. One is my son was a student at Pali during the clusters of the suicides. And there are many level crossings along our corridor. There are many level crossings throughout the country that don't have the same problems that we have. And I think if we were going to spend money, obviously, these processes are going to take a long time to have grade separation, but it may not necessarily solve the problem because a lot of these kids are on antidepressant drugs, which have known side effects for suicidal thoughts and violence. So I think we need to do something about it. I want to follow this business about Seal. My son rode his bike to Pali every day. And there are ways that bike bridges or bike brigades are managed at key crossing times in the Netherlands and other places that moves students across so they're not in a single line crossing. And I think that the whole like Seal idea is really a bad idea. It's not really going to solve the problem. It's going to create more problems. On the funding side of things, you know, this 15%, which is what, 300,000, and the 35%, it's another 700,000. My math is right, that's about $1 million to get us to the next steps. And echoing Mr. Burt's very smart comments that we're going to be down the road with the Wizard of Oz or whatever. I'm trying to think of a good analogy where we're going to have this big plan and the pocketbook is empty to do it. So I think with the quiet zones where the Pali kids are not listening to the horns blowing all day long as kind of a siren call, which is very disturbing to them, we should really look at some other paths, and maybe there are many other paths, but I feel like we're going through this level crossing thing that is the wizard's curtain is going to disappear. So anyway, again, thank you. I'm optimistic about the quiet zones, but 5 years is way too long. So thank you.
Our next speaker is Stephen R.
Yeah, hi, this is Stephen Rosenblum. Yeah, I would like to add on to what the previous speakers have said about the bicycle undercrossing. I can't imagine hundreds of Pali students going through that crossing at one time in an underpass. I've almost been run down in the California Avenue tunnel by a few bicycles. And even though the signs say bicyclists must dismount, nobody pays attention to that if they're under the age of 15. So I think it'll be dangerous for pedestrians as well. And then I'd also like to comment about the partial underpass at Churchill. I don't know if people have really paid attention to what's there. People tend to think of it as an elevated crossing, but the trains are still at grade level, and they're separated from the bicycle path by a chain link fence. I don't know, what the physical limitations would be on people getting past that fence, but all the psychological effects are still there. And that bicycle path is right next to the high school, which, has been the source of all the suicidal ideation issues at the Churchill crossing. So I think leaving the train at grade level, even though it's separated by a fence, is still not a good solution. I really urge you to think about getting the trains above street level. I think that's really required, and that any other solution we're going to regret in the future. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Adrian B.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Wanted to touch on a few different points. I apologize. I just joined the meeting, so I'm just going to make some comments that may or may not be relevant to things, or maybe duplicating things that were already said. I do agree with a number of the previous speakers. The first point I wanted to make is in reference to Caltrain's comments about building around electrification. I just urge everyone to think carefully about that the world is full of electric railroads, and they do grade separation projects and all sorts of projects all the time, as a matter of course, around electrified railroads, whether it be third rail or overhead contact wire like we have. So, it's not like a new thing. I know it's new to Caltrain, and it's probably new to local construction contractors. So I just would urge that we not overblow the difficulty and try to learn from best practices elsewhere. We're going to have to go out of the US to learn about that stuff. Next is the quiet zones, which I completely support. But I do want to urge caution on wayside horns. My mother-in-law lives off East Meadow. There's Palo Alto Commons and the Atria. There's a number of sensitive receptors that would not at all be pleased by a wayside horn. I think if you're gonna, it's kind of like doing a half-baked solution. The whole point is to remove the incessant horn blowing and noise. And I realize that a wayside horn reduces the sound footprint, but it is still a horn. And if you look around the world, and there are examples on YouTube with YouTube videos of wayside horns, it's not nice. If you're going to go through the effort of doing a quiet zone, please do a fully baked solution and have it truly be a quiet zone. Remember also that with quiet zones, the train operators still have full discretion to use the horn as much as they deem necessary if they see any sort of suspicious or safety issue. So it's not like the whole point of a quiet zone is to get rid of mindless rote horn blowing, which is exactly what a wayside horn continues to do, blasting in either direction of the crossing, blasting the neighbors and anybody in that earshed. So I urge you not to do that. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on suicides. I know Councilmember Byrd and I have had a little bit of a difference on this, but I think it's not as much of a difference as some might think. I absolutely agree that a grade separation would prevent a spur of the moment suicide, but means denial is not achieved by doing one grade separation when there are stations everywhere nearby. Thank you.
Our final speaker is Roland.
Comments in the interest of time. First of all, through the chair, I'm wondering if it would be possible in the future to enable the save transcript button so that we can have a complete, picture of what was said during the meeting. On the quiet zones, my recommendation to you is to pay close attention to what's going on with Bright Line in Florida. Specifically, all the quiet zones are being rejected for safety reasons. And my last comment is, I'm not going to be addressing this here. I will be following up in writing to the committee, is to address the points that Steve Rosenblum and Adrian Brand made, is that how these grade separations are done elsewhere in the world. And I will be presenting you with a potential solution on how to build a viaduct at Meadow and Churchill. Thank you.
That concludes public comment.
Thank you. And Nadia?
I had a question about how the closure element is being treated. So we're taking the locally preferred alternative at Churchill at 15% design, but there were a number of concerns about the closure. And I'm wondering, are we flushing those out, or is that just kind of as a placeholder? Like, how's it being treated in the process?
It's considered as a backup, so it's not being modified at this time. So if at later date, council decides to pursue instead of the locally preferred alternative that council has already selected, we can look into that at that time.
And then just one comment to what Edgar had talked about in terms of the digital twins on the models. I mean, a lot of what has driven the price increases in Burlingame is not just inflation, but the fact that the work windows, meaning the time in which things can be constructed, doesn't fit neatly into contractor timing, right? They've got, oh, we can build this and we can build that. And then someone comes back and says, oh, the rules are you can also only work between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. And so I know that we're much more aware of that now, but that in the past has been a lot of the surprise factor for many of the other cities' grade separations. And certainly Palo Alto has been ringing that bell for a long time. So I'm looking forward to how that gets included in those digital models. I also wanted to just flag that it looks like some of the refinement points, like for August, you're going to come back to the rail committee for approved refinement concepts. I just want to caution against trying to do public outreach in the summer. It's hard. So if we want to get some of these neighborhood meetings going sooner rather than later, it'd be great. I know we're having now these for April for the BPTP and what have you, but we got to get them out there fast to make sure that you get the people that you want to get. Otherwise, people will come back and say they were never outreached to. I just wanted to confirm the money that we've gotten, we actually haven't gotten. It's an award that is a refund, correct? Once we've spent that money, the money gets put back in our account, because there's a lot of people in the public who seem to think that money has been put in our piggy bank and we can just do stuff. And that's not my understanding, right?
No, that's correct. It's on reimbursement basis. So we have to spend up first and then get reimbursements.
Can you let the mayor know that? Seriously. Okay. I think that concludes our meeting today. And have we set a date for our meeting in 2 months?
Yes, I believe it's the third Thursday of May.
Okay. thank you all. Look forward to seeing you then.
Thank you. Sorry, third Tuesday of May. Not the...
Better yet.